we're not protecting this at all costs for every child. And it's just like first principle thinking, like just protect nasal breathing and oral posture and development.
Oh, this is major. It's like the next big thing. Come catch the wave, yeah. Watch what's happening. A force of nature. Hit 'em like lightning. Be the creator of the next big thing. We're the movers and shakers. We are the dreamers, the makers. We stand on top of equators. We are the limitless. We got the future, no papers. We are the innovators. We have the focus like lasers. You know we doing it big. Oh, this is major.
Welcome to the Compromised to Alchemized podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Neil Bolton-Donnie, and I'm really phenomenally excited to introduce today's guest. It is Greg McLean, and he is Project Airway. I always love introducing him, whether that be just talking about him from his Instagram handle, which that is Project Airway, and is his project. Just to people when I'm meeting them in person or online, or also I was at his gym, Premier Fitness Systems in the Scottsdale, Arizona, over the summer in June, and he hosted me for an event. I did my Floor to the Mouth tour training for Phoenix there, and not only did he host me there, and he was gracious to offer me his space, but it was a phenomenal space to do the training at, but he also spoke in Mod 3. But some of you've been following Greg, you know him, you know that he is just a wealth of knowledge, information. And, I'm going to read his mission. It's to educate the world on airway, health, sleep, the jaw, nasal function, and how it's all connected to our breathing. So, he does virtual support, in-person support. And it's just, I love our topic that we discussed because, we're delving into some of the nitty-gritty of what we both pore over and meticulously investigate. So it's really fun to hear him talk about just how he thinks and his story. This is going to be the first of multiple interviews on my podcast. It's the first official one, although we've done some Instagram lives together as well. And really great. He's got some really good resources coming out. So he's got a 90-minute hypermobility course where he covers like top 3 things to help people with that. I saw that firsthand. And not only did I see, kind of others really be impressed with his education, he just these schematics and he really explains it, but he did some demo work on some people that he brought in, but also on a couple of the attendees. And we got to see real time, like his knowledge and also how he helps people with hypermobility, which is way more people than, just those with Ehlers-Danlos and some other condition names. A lot of people are walking around with this hypermobility, but he, dispels some myths, but more than that, he just offers help and support. And is what we talked about the first time we ever connected. And it was really cool to just see this, topic that we both care about. And now to see he's got this course out, long awaited. He's also got a list, and some of you have seen it, many providers, many states. He lists those who kind of are really great resources for expansion, palate expansion, for kids and adults, and just really by procedure, he lists them out. So highly recommend checking out the show notes, and I highly recommend listening to this episode. If you haven't already followed Project Airway, follow him. Let's see. I'm really excited also to be back in the office that I have started out in my Santa Barbara work, which is in Santa Barbara Mayo, which is Nicole Cantella's office. So I started out here when we moved in February, but on trips before we even moved, I would see patients out of her original office, which was just one room, Can't wait to interview her on the podcast because she's got a vision that just keeps expanding, or rather, her vision and what she saw keeps unfolding. And so I'm in my office now. That is a nice space, amazing views, and I'm really excited to be here. So I just want to make sure you all know that I am here, Santa Barbara. Yes, I still do some visits in LA, and yes, I have been going to the Bay Area, but really, my heart and soul is to be home where we live. So, we've got some speaking events coming up in 2026, and definitely there are times I'm going to travel for collaborations that I've got going on and things like that. But if you want to come for my system reset experience, I just had somebody from Vegas. Uh, Dynamite, amazing time. 2 day experience, 10 hours of healing, pre and post consult Zoom bookends. And we just dive deep into healing and what that looks like. Yes, focus on all the expertise areas that I have, but it's about change. And so what better person to talk about change with, and that's my segue, than Greg McLean, talking about his work, our worlds, and how they overlap. And yep, you're gonna hear the music from that you heard from Lunalux. I love that, and just encourage you to comment. And I really want to get more of these amazing gems and show them to the world, so that anybody from my audience, if you don't know Greg, you're just gonna love what he has to share. And for those of you that already know him, can't wait to see what you think either. So enjoy.
Oh, this is major.
All right, I'm here with Greg McLean, Project Airway. Excited for our chat today. We've had some good conversations, Greg. So it feels just in one way in the flow to talk. But it's been a bit since I've seen you. It's been since the summer when I had the great pleasure to come spend time with you in Scottsdale, near Phoenix, Arizona, and you're at your gym now. But we had a chance to not only meet, just connect. You spoke during my Floor of the Mouth tour event, which was awesome. And that like little bubble there was like a special time. But before and after, we've had other fun connections, and just always love sharing thoughts and hearing you're just a very independent, innovative thinker outside the box. So excited for our conversation and what it will yield.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. It's cool. Like it's kind of one of those things. It's one thing to obviously watch what you do from afar, but that was one of the coolest things. Is like as a practitioner, right? You have this amazing ability to listen to the body. So when you get to like watch people work with, I remember that little girl you worked with that was like 3, and then you've got adults. It's always interesting to, I've been training for 30 years, so getting to see the way all kinds of people that specialize in different modalities, how they try to tune into the person they're working with and what they're able to accomplish, or just where they go from a strategy perspective as far as the way they like to treat and how they are able to listen to the body. And I think that's, as a practitioner, that's all we can do, right? If we want to get better, it's like just be open to learning from a lot of amazing people that might do things very different. And I think like you get this opportunity over the years to just build this level of knowledge, and people are like, where the hell did you learn that? And you're like, oh, I went to this weird seminar, or I went to this. And over the years, you just like, I don't know, I just know a lot of stuff. And it was cool watching you work on people for a few days. So glad to be
Yeah,
on this.
was awesome. Yeah, I mean, it was that I feel like I say the phrase when you go down the rabbit hole, like when you're learning things or when you're like that co-experiencing things. It's almost a too often uttered phrase by me, but I feel like it's the only, like, it's the best way to say it. Like, you've been down the many rabbit holes, but it was also really powerful to watch you. Um, it wasn't just during your teaching slot, right? Because we talked about it, and during Mod 3 complex cases of my 4 module 2 day course. I love to bring in somebody who can, like, expertise, can talk on a subject, and and we both kind of landed on you sharing on hypermobility. But really, the amazing thing was you shared very multidimensionally from your from your experience and expertise on how you've helped people with hypermobility. And then it also was amazing. Like I could see the look on people's faces in the attendees when they were learning and just so transfixed and engaged. But also afterwards, just hearing their comments, I'm like, I knew it, but it's like they were like, wow, they just really felt like they learned so much from you, and both intellectually as well as paradigmatically, things they hadn't thought about or understood. And then also you had like that brother sister you
Oh yeah.
demoed, and so it was like a really very hands-on. I'll add in another dimension, your schematics. So cool. Like on the whiteboard, you had like very detailed, schematics that you drew out, and you were kind of like, oh, these are just well, I mean, some people that's pretty impressive. The visuals, along with the in person, along with the teaching, and then you add in, I guess I'll call it that fourth dimension of new paradigms. And that's what I loved it because I'm like, oh, we think we know different things, but we have a resonance in how we go about things because I don't really rely on what anybody else has told me. I'm like, I need to like assimilate amazing stuff, but then process it through the way I've been shown. Because I just feel like sometimes we have to get outside of paradigms that exist in order to see maybe truth, right? So maybe
Yeah,
if you jump into that too, it's like, okay, how far back could you look at yourself, Greg, and see that you were like a systems thinker, pattern recognition, outside of the box thinker? Like how early do you recall being
probably
that?
like even as a kid, I remember like one of the first movies. I mean, probably 8 or 9 when like Goonies came out, and
Hmm.
the the guy that made all the gadgets, and like that's the way I've always thought. So I've always thought of like I was watching a podcast over the weekend with Dr. Jack Cruz, and here's a
Yeah,
guy who started as an oral surgeon, then he went to a neurosurgeon, right? And then he's talking
right.
about how neurosurgeons 25 years ago used wires and stuff, and he had worked with plates and screws, and how here's a guy that's like he's a resident, and like he's teaching all the surgeons how to use plates and bring it into just neurology because of his experience as an oral surgeon. It's like I've always been one of those things where it's like I don't feel like you have to just do what most people have done. Most
Hmm.
people just do it because that's what they've been told, and they told them to do it that way. And I'm like, is that the most efficient way? And then it's like
Yeah.
I just like part of the journey is like it's not being right. It's like just be open to what exists, and like just go find what works the best. And like I think some people, that's where you're like you figure it out, and this is where like a lot of people like, oh sweet, now I'm going to market it, I'm going to be the expert, and I'm going to make money. And I tend to like get bored. Like the minute I figure out how to do something complicated, it's like, all right, on to the next thing. Because it's like I enjoy the figuring out the puzzle of life. And I think like with human health, it's so interconnected that like I probably feel like I'd need 3 lifetimes to really understand many more facets of the body and how it interplays. So it's like it never gets old. It's just more like where do you want to put your lens as far as I got to focus on fascia, I'm going to focus on airway. What am I learning this week, this month? And sometimes it becomes overwhelming. Like you can't, you're like, God, there's not going to be enough time. I can't figure out how it all works. And then sometimes you just hear something said by someone else and you're like, I don't know. I just kind of get it now. And it's like, you just feel like you're banging your head sometimes. And then other times it's like, it starts to all come together and make sense. And then you just kind of make these observations, and it's a never ending process, which I love.
So tell me, like as we get a little bit, I'm gonna go. I think I'm excited to go further into, um, like delve deep into that terrain, which could for some people feel like swimming deep, and there's a lot of, like you said, it could be overwhelming. So if we dive deep, below the surface, I'm just getting that visual of like the deeper you go in the ocean or the water, the more pressure there is. And it's like it can feel overwhelming when you go really deep. But the nice thing is, when those of us have had those deep dives, we can distill it to make it simpler. So it's not as weighty or burdensome. But maybe before we dive deeper into some of that, what tell me, like, where did you start out, like, as a trainer? Paint the picture of like how you got into what you do now.
Yeah, so I was actually going to school to be electrical engineer. So I've always
Mm,
thought, always loved math. It kind of makes sense. I love physics. Kind of having a deeper understanding of the why things do what they do. And then I was 3 years in. I had done my second summer internship, and it was like there was no real human element to the people I'd be working with. Like most of these people, their best friends were their computers. They were antisocial. And it's like, I do not want to sit in a cube for the rest of my life and crunch numbers and figure out complex stuff. Like, I like to interact with people and just being in the sun and active. And I like the, I like a good blend of stand sit where I'm using my brain both places, but it's not just one thing all the time. And so I remember telling my dad, and I was like, I don't think I want to do this. One of my best friend's dads was a firefighter of 30 years. And so for me, I mean, I had had two jobs. I had worked at Wendy's my senior year in high school, and then I delivered pizza while I was in college on Sunday nights. And so I would always get to I started testing for firefighting, and I would always get through the physical. The math was easy. And I'd always get to like a second interview, and I realized that, at 21 years old, that it was going to take me years because in Phoenix, it's such a desirable job. I mean, you'll have 5,000 people turn up for 10 spots in the fire department here. So it became one of those things where I started training after I graduated while I was testing. And I was like, all right, like, I'm just going to wait till I get hired. And then my first job I started training there was six guys. One guy was married and everyone else was single. And like, we were best friends and we partied on the weekends, and then all of our clients became friends with each other because we were all friends. So we worked at a 24-hour fitness, and then to this day, you know two of my buddies their they opened two gyms across town from us. Me and my buddy opened this gym. We've had Premier Fitness Systems for 17 years. And then one of my buddies became a firefighter, and then the other one works for like a governing body. But like to this day, like the group of dudes that I started with, and then a guy came in after that was kind of like our seventh, and he owns his own gym too. So it was just like this awesome, just group of people. I felt like it was like a fraternity, but like it was around
yeah.
fitness and health. And for me, I was so bored when I get to college with engineering. I had 5 hours of homework a night, and I was used to playing sports 3, 4 hours a day. So I remember I started lifting weights my freshman year, the week before college started, and I've never stopped. And I remember for me, I could never gain weight. And I think by the end of my freshman year, I'd put on 20 pounds of muscle. And I think that's where it really shifted my self confidence, and fitness kind of filled that void of not having sports from my whole childhood. And that's kind of like where I was like, you know what? Like, I think I want to do fitness. And so I've just kind of stuck with it ever since. And it's like, now I look at it as like, I love to train. I love everything related to health, sleep, recovery, mindset. And then it's just like, I just look at it as like, people come in to see me to work out now, but it's like, I know a lot of stuff about a lot of health stuff. And it's
Oh yeah.
more of I can spend 5, 6 hours a day training and working with athletes and regular Joes, and there's that human aspect, and it's cool because I love fitness. I get to do it myself, and then there's this. I want to spend the rest of my life like teaching and helping others. I feel like what we learn in school versus in the real world
Yeah.
and the hierarchy of needs and what really matters relative to health. It's like I've kind of learned from my own journey and then from a lot of reading and a lot of different kind of seminars, different things I've done that like I just want to share this to kind of help people because I feel like there's a lot of bad intel out there, and I think there's certain things that people want to be less and less human these days, and like for us to stay healthy, regardless, even if 50 years from now we've got pentium chips in our brain, we're still going to be human. And I think at the end of the day, you got to eat foods that our ancestors ate and get out in the sun. And, you know, we've got to sustain muscle mass and all these things. I think the more we try to hack humanity from a health perspective, the worse we do. I think at some point, I think there's got to be this like, hey, let's return to what our ancestors did because we've gone so full robot, we don't even know who we are anymore as humans, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah, I think there's so much in there that like tendency to um yeah, optimize past certain points. But yeah, I mean, it's you know, I think really you're kind of like, there's like this autodidact, this renaissance person you are, because you could say it like when I think of going to you, or like when I looked at what you provide, not only on your like, teaching and social media, but when people come to you, they get so much. They get somebody who's like synthesizing a lot of information. Is we'll talk, I would love to delve into your own personal story journey of healing. But also like you braid together so many, you could say, different kinds of health avenues, metrics, or even seemingly disparate areas, because it's all interconnected. As you said, it's all like we're one being. And so if you can look across this spectrum of information and data, there's a lot to explore there. So there's so much. There was another word I was going to use, but that doesn't matter. It's a synonym for autodidact, or, because I mean, I look at you. Well, it's really fascinating that you have this engineering background. In fact, like the way back when I went to chiropractic college, the guy that the system that I learned, who I learned from all the people that he taught, because he had passed away, but he was an engineer that understood that and then took it to the body to become a chiropractor. And so his system was really very, what was mechanically, biomechanically, but he just thought and he applied concepts that weren't there yet in the field. So I kind of took that and went my own way with it, but I really kind of feel like it makes sense when I look at your schematics too. I'm like, because it's really about, like you could say, architecting someone's health, but engineering someone's health, looking at it from the ground up, inside out, looking at opposing forces, physics, and looking at humanity. We can't separate that. So it's really cool when I saw you work, because there was those other times, not just with the demo patients or people. um, there was then, after your teaching session, you took somebody over to like the gym area, and then you demonstrated like some of your concepts and showed us like, here's what I do and here's how it plays out with hypermobility. We got a chance to collaborate in that and like both look at what one another were doing, and I was like, it's like a playground. It's like your playground,
Yeah, the
but
lab,
it's
baby,
not.
the lab.
It's the lab. It's the lab, but it's the lab of healing where you really see people get better. So I know one of the things that struck me when we first ever talked, it was like a Zoom or whatever it was, and we talked about hypermobility, and you're like, there's, because you Premier Fitness Systems, right? You help uh, a lot of athletes, especially golfers, and you could touch on more of that. But we went right to hypermobility. You're like, what's on my mind a lot is all these people coming in with hypermobility, men and women, but especially the women, and you just felt, you could feel your compassion bleeding through, and I know that that's what really drives you. So, yeah, if you could say like both, what's it like to like traverse that, like working with these high performing athletes, and then working with that woman who comes in who's hypermobile, and you're just like helping that person. How do those worlds collide for you?
I guess I think from the athlete perspective, it's like where you catch them in their career. Are they in high school? I'd say, for the most part, we've got a lot of golf and pitchers in
Mhm.
baseball so are tend to be hypermobile. And then I'd say, the vast majority of many women that I've trained over the years, like thousands of girls, I would say maybe 20-30% wouldn't be hypermobile in the lower body, but the vast majority upper body.
Mm.
And it's like it might not be EDS. I just look at it as like a
Right.
spectrum. And
Yeah.
it's like more like I just like want rigidity so that if I do a few simple things like a plank or this and that, that like I'm not going to see a locked out elbow.
Right.
And it's like, so those are just norms. And I guess for so many years of my career, I didn't understand. And then somewhere along the way, it was like 25 years into training, I also started to get into the airway world. And then that's where I just started to realize because one, I think a disservice we do in sports performance as well as health and training is that we have like this treatment approach where we don't think about the body from above the neck. And
Hmm.
it's like it all happens here. It's
Right.
like this is your puppet. This is where you control the puppet. What I have access to down here comes from this. And I'm not saying bottom up doesn't matter, but like
Right.
this. And so oftentimes like I was just you become frustrated because you learn all these things and then you're like I can't help this person in front of me. They could be a D1 or an LPGA golfer or it's like it could be the 65-year-old woman, but it's like it doesn't matter. Or I could have the $1 million guy that throws 98 miles an hour, like that's 6'5" and weighs 180 pounds. It didn't. Everything I had learned did not fit this model of how to help this person train and actually stay out of pain and start to get themselves better without kind of creating more issues. And then this is where it's like I started to see like with the whole airway thing, like this is like huge. Like most people can't keep their mouth closed. They can't support the weight of their head. And then you've got a skeleton that's going to shift because you can't support the head with like a loft effect because the tongue doesn't fit. And then we've got a bunch of people that are kind of hybrid mouth breather, nasal breathers that they're good athletes. They've got amazing eye hand coordination, but it's like their system and their structure and the way they scaffold their body is not ideal. And then most of these people, their strategies for how to do things create many of the issues which prevent them probably sooner than they'd like to end their career due to injuries. And I think that's with athletes, and I think with a lot of these older women, I would see is like a lot of them love classes, yoga, Pilates. Well, I feel like the intention of a lot of the teaching is good, but like a lot of the people that they maybe took classes from that taught these classes were also hypermobile. So they don't know what they don't know. And so they mean well, and they were doing the same thing I was doing the first 20 years of my career. But then it's just like that drastically changed how and what I do with people because I realized the things that I would do, these people are just going to cheat the way they cheat everything else due to their basically their system. And then it's like it's not going to inherently help them. So it's like, yeah, you can do the splits or you can do this, but it's just like that's going to wreak havoc on your body, your neck, your elbows, your shoulders by the time you're 40. And then I would see all these women in here that they were superstars in the world of yoga at 20 or this and that, Pilates. And now it's like, the 46-year-old that comes in that was that. And she's had two kids and she's like, I've got chronic neck pain. I've got to shoot my face with Botox, getting nerves burned off in my shoulders. I've got tendonitis in my elbow, my wrist. I'm a hairstylist or a dental hygienist. And it's like, I've got rotator cuff issues, and all of that is just a body that's compensated for so long, it's got no options left. And this is like, then people feel like they're at the edge of a cliff and they've seen doctors and pain management. And then you're like, how do I get this person back to a place that like they can just get out of bed and feel safe doing life, and then just be able to go back to things that they loved, because they aren't so afraid that if they go do it once that they're not going to be able to do their job for the next few weeks. And it's sad. And I think a lot of it has to do with a system that doesn't want to change to address this above the neck.
Yeah. Well, I also know, like, you have compassion because you really care for people, but I think you also have that, compassion, empathy, because you've talked about some of your own struggles, the journey in health, and you wouldn't be who you are if you hadn't been through that, and you've kind of, you've had to look, under all these stones, turn them, and try to find answers, for your own. We talked about some of it. We could start in saying, like, what, you know, I'd love to hear that, because it's a bridge for how you help people too. Is you're not just somebody who's like looking at broken systems, thinking this should be better, this should be better. You're a person who has had to like resurrect and kind of reconstruct and reform health too. So can you share what you want to on that, how that's your own journey's been, and how that's kind of informed you?
Yeah, like I guess I look back, I grew up in Boston, East Coast, right?
Oh yeah.
Just freezing cold, tons of mold in houses,
Yeah.
just the seasons are like, I mean, I was asthma attacks at 2 months old. Like,
Mm, yeah.
so I think about it now. I think, I'm the generation like my mom was told that, like, hey, there's stuff that you can't get in breast milk and formula, you know. And then, I
Yeah.
often think like, how many of these kids with tongue ties, if they would have breastfed, with the if you have enough pressure, does the tongue tie actually start to tear over time and actually restore normal function? Like, just knowing what I know about like fascia, if you get enough tension. And it's like thinking how, then I broke my nose when I was 6 years old.
Hmm.
They didn't fix it back then. So it was like, as an adult, they scoped my nose. I couldn't even breathe. They
Mm.
couldn't even get the scope in one of my nostrils. And I'm
Oh
thinking,
wow.
like, my maxilla in my 40s was 28 millimeters. It's like, that's like a 3-year-old maxilla. So, for me, having been sick my whole childhood, here's my mom, colicky baby, this and that. And then to think that, like, obviously I couldn't get my tongue to the roof of my mouth, and learning all this stuff now. And then it's crazy to me what we're out there pitching. It's it's madness that pediatricians and primary physicians don't understand that like mouth breathing is a metabolic disease, and that's not
Right.
talked about.
Yeah.
And I look at those that, I'm not like a pro expansion this and that. I just look at, I've had this ability through Project Airway to talk with people all over the world, and
Yeah.
people that share their stories with their kids. And I have this ability to see all these kids with where are they from a numbers perspective by such and such age. And then that's allowed me to see like the pro athletes of young children when it comes to airway. Like, who are the outliers? What does that look like? And how you kind of see that like, there's certain things that really move the marker. And then you can be a parent that's aware for many of these other things, but if you're not LeBron and Sabrina or Serena having a baby where it's like you just got two outlier genetics coming together, that many of us today are just, we're behind the eight ball from an airway perspective, even if parents are part of this world. And I guess it's been frustrating to see how knowledge is just kind of so compartmentalized, and the different facets of medicine have like these different beliefs and treatment. And for me, being like an engineer, I like always just look at like, well, like what moves the marker. Like I'm going to look at these kids that are like here, and I'm like, what has gotten them here? And I'm someone that's like, if you're not hitting these numbers and this is possible, like I feel like this is where it makes sense to be like, all right, what are these people doing? And I feel like we should be coaching society on kind of like this if we want the best help for kids. And, I see every day like how just most people are just unaware of a lot of these things. And when I see a few like the best expansion orthos, like Dr. Marisa Santos, I did an interview with her,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Courtney Donko in Chicago. Here are these moms that at 3 and 4 years old, they already had kids that were outliers and they were still expanding their kids upper and lower. And then to see where these kids are at numbers wise, that, you see a 4-year old that has a 40 millimeter intermolar width. And I'm thinking, like, these are little 4-year old kids that have better jaws than every one of the dudes that works at my gym. But like, I got three guys that have one guy that has lockjaw every morning when he wakes up, another guy that's got severe sleep apnea, and another guy basically went through his handlebars when he was 12 and broke his
Mm.
nose, has a bridge across his top six. Like all three of them are 30 with six packs that can deadlift 500 pounds, but they have serious breathing issues that just haven't taken hold yet. And then when I think of like these little kids that have, let's just say, a 4-year old with, a jaw that size and the potential for a kid to keep their wisdom teeth, you're like, this is where it's at. Like, let's pay attention to what these people are doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
like, for me to realize I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for stuff that, like, you could put a piece of plastic in a 4-year old, and, like, these kids are, like, there.
Mm.
Kid's probably not going to need braces. Why? Because his teeth had plenty of room. And it's not about the teeth, it's about the airway. Like, give your kid a chance to breathe well for the rest of their life. Just set them up. And then it's just like most health stuff will just kind of fall to the
Yeah.
wayside
Yeah.
because you just started from a really good place. And then I think of all these kids that, like, a kid can just be a kid.
Yeah. Or so I mean, there's so much to unpack there in one way because it's like to make it like to kind of jump in. It's like you. I mean, it's almost like you're definitely. Well, I mean, you've been through a lot,
Yeah.
and you're looking at this as Greg has been through a lot, but you're also outwardly like saying like, look, if we can spread this message, or if you can have people aware to do these kinds of things with kids at such a young age, you can change their lives dramatically. So do you gotta look at this as like it's almost like you're talking to Greg, right? You're like, Greg, you made it, you're making it, but
Yeah.
here's what could have been like had you had the fortune of being around somebody who knew this at like when you were a kid. I mean, is that
Yeah.
like is that like just to get into the nitty-gritty of that, is that a grieve have you grieved that? Is that something like that you had to grieve and then to work through it? Because some people don't know how to push through that and then to take stock of their lives to then persevere to seek out all of this that you're mentioning. It's kind of like it hasn't been easy for you to pursue your own health. So it's almost like I want to make it really clear for somebody who doesn't they have no idea what your journey is. Like, almost can you list like who are like the kinds of practitioners that you've seen? You don't have to go through every one of it, but what's this list like of somebody who looks at themselves as somebody who didn't have the help they needed, and then you sought it out? Because then the next question I'm going to ask is, you clearly help people from all over, and how do you distill that, and you kind of already are. But let's start with this. Like, what's that? What's it been like for you? What have you had to seek out?
I guess there was, me as a child where my mom's like every kind of doctor. I've
Yeah.
every kind of nasal spray, asthma. It's not like it helped.
Yeah.
It's just more like what else was I gonna do? I did everything possible. And then I get expanded at 45 years old and it's like I never
Mm,
have a runny nose ever again. I literally
yeah.
gave away all my stuff, every neti pot nasal spray. I could
Right.
now ride a bike outside in the pollen falling on me like snow and
Mm,
be like, yeah, I'm good.
yeah.
And then to realize that, like, that's it. Yet the gold standard for adults with sleep apnea is still a CPAP that
Right.
doesn't work the other 16 hours a day, and how, you know, we're not protecting this at all costs for every child. And it's just like, just like first principle thinking, like just protect nasal breathing and oral posture and development from if the top of the puppet moves well, the rest of the puppet has a chance. If your puppet is broken at the top at 2 years old, you're trying to make a broken puppet work for the rest of your life. And at some point, you're going to buy all new pieces, and it's just going to be a cluster. So then it becomes this whole, yeah, like from a helping people strategy because these kids don't know. I mean, I have crazy conversations like when you have a mom with a 4-year-old child that starts crying to you because she's like, my kid got expanded 3 months ago. And a 4-year-old kid that just said, like, Mom, I feel so good in my body now. Like, you
Mm,
don't coach a 4-year-old to say that.
right.
And then she's like, oh my God, like, that's such a win for me. But then she's like, if he feels good now, that means he was suffering,
Yeah.
but I didn't even know that. And it's like, I think it's because many parents realize that they have sleep apnea or some dysfunctional breathing. And they're like, well, it's fine. But it's like, well, for a kid, it's like they don't know that anything else exists. And I look at all these kids today with all these sensory issues and this and that. And it's like, just protect the breathing at all costs. Let this kid develop. It's kind of like you. I've never seen someone with a well-developed jaw, for the most part, have hypermobility. They tend not to be people with sleep issues. They tend not to be people with sensory issues. There's a lot there. So if we protect these kids in the airway, it's like we're protecting the brain because we sleep and we breathe well. And then it's just like, otherwise, we get busy in our late 30s. We have a family, and then, I have too many parents that like stop taking care of themselves because now they got to prioritize their kid. And now it's like we've got a bunch of adults basically trying to get through their day, living off Red Bull and Celsius. And, they've got nothing left at the end of the day for their marriage because they've got sleep issues. They don't want to go to the gym, and it's like everything they have goes to their job and their children. And then it's just like we just become shells of ourselves. And I think a lot of that has to do with we have we're stuck running like golf cart engines for this V12 that we are supposed to spend the rest of our life with. And when our engine and our pipes and our nose and our mouth can't support the structure, we end up burning out around 30 or 40. And then it's just like, the only way you're hacking that the second half of life is a lot of drugs and a lot of doctor's appointments.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're less, just keeps going through my head. You're a really good person to talk to about both the original tagline that went through my head of how can we go. I said this to my wife Dawn one late night. I was like, how can we go from compromised airway to an alchemized airway? And I decided to keep it at compromised to alchemized because some people don't even know they have a compromised airways. So it's just like, well, how can we go from compromised to alchemized? And I know one of your simple statements there will protect the airway is a huge way that we can go from both a compromised airway to an alchemized one. And because yeah, you could say what you hit was just right there. People who don't find, like, a lot of people in this like space or finding out, I didn't really know either. We have kids with tongue tie and narrow palate. We find out, oh, I've got the issues, and then we're trying to raise our kids with a compromised state. And so I'm speaking more for like other parents and families out there who they're like, I want to take care of myself, but I need to take care of them first. And then some realize, but I can't take care of them unless I'm sound and healthy. And so it's both, right? It's like all the above. That can feel overwhelming when it's like everybody in the house needs all this, and it doesn't have to be everybody needs to go run to a ton of providers to get healing. Because I really love that you're like a systems thinker, try to boil it down and find like what is at its essence going to help people, because you've run around so many places and you've found things that have helped, but you've also found things that didn't work. And I'm not saying one size fits all, but if you were like really to give like a 1 2 3 combo of like for anybody out there, parent or kid, how can they go run at this in a palatable, pardon the pun, way that feels like they can digest it. You know, follow you on Instagram. That'd be number one, right? Follow Craig on Project Airway because you got so many keys that you share on this. But like maybe other three other things that you could say are like today, if you want to like make some headway on this, just have these three things in mind. Um, so that people feel like, oh, at least I can do something right now today that might catalyze them towards further down the rabbit hole. Do you have a top three?
Yeah, I would say if we're gonna go today, it'd be like, can you fit the tongue on the roof of your mouth, and
Mhm.
can you create suction, where like
Mhm.
basically the tip of the tongue should sit just behind the front teeth. It's called the incisive papilla. It's a little dot, and then the biggest thing is the whole tongue should sit across the hard palate, the soft palate.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest reasons why most people have jaw, neck, all kinds of postural issues is a lot of people have a tongue that doesn't fit, and a lot of times that means that the posterior part of the tongue, the back of the tongue, if I had like a
Mhm.
dime, and I imagine I had a dime here, and my palate was made of soft wax, and I wanted to stamp the dime, it should basically be able to sit on that palate.
Right.
The minute I have that, it's like a forklift, right? The tongue sits there. It's like I'm going to press in like a chest compression. The forklift has gone up, and then I'm going to swallow a few times, and that seals the oral cavity.
Yeah.
First thing I would say is, does your tongue fit? Second thing I would say is, whether you go to the gym today, whether you walk outside, is your mouth closed while you're breathing? Pay attention to that. And I think the third thing someone could do today is, are you putting away every electronic device an hour before you're going to bed? No
Mm.
blue light, stay away from EMF, Wi Fi, pick up a book, whatever it is you want to do, just put the electronics away an hour before you go to bed. But I think those are three things to protect your sleep, become aware of the way you breathe, your your oral posture. I think those are all big things that are like, just check in, see what
Yeah.
happens with that.
Well, that's good. It hits on like pretty powerful concepts that some people maybe they know it, but that's more info than what they knew. And also, some people don't. Well, we need reminders. We need like action steps, and I think it's good to cater towards like this time when people need 1 2 3. But I know people that know your work, and some others in our field or in a field of caring about airway. Um, there could be a lot more there. There could be like you could go, somebody who's like, what next? You're like, oh, don't get me wrong. Greg is you can go so deep with people, but I feel like, yeah, one of the things we have in common is whether it's caring for a parent or navigating an athlete's journey, and kind of like revealing sometimes keys, and some people are like, well, I knew that, but it really helps when you break it down. And when I think when people say, when you're telling me it's this important and I can connect the dots within my own health journey, okay, that's motivating, right? Because some people to come into me, they're like, I got an amazing daily routine. I'm already good. Sure, give me something easy. Other people are like, I didn't I didn't even know that I needed to put anything in to a routine other than my meditation or my prayer or my exercise of foam rolling you know, they're like, I wouldn't have even known that something so simple as putting the tongue up there would create that kind of dramatic change. So I love when people get breakthrough off of just that. Um, and then, thinking to like our time together where you raised awareness on somebody like, yeah, be aware of this part of your body and how does that feel? And like, that's kind of, interoception, tuning in to your body to be able to see and listen and understand. And that some people, that's a skill to develop too, where they haven't really practiced that. They've been relying too much on what other people tell them, or there's people who haven't been given that right like validation that they know what they're doing. I feel like that's come up a lot, you know. Um, so maybe go down this part of the rabbit hole further. Yeah, I know you talked about up here the head, and you said, yeah, there's not enough of talk about the head down. And then you said the ground up matters too. So could you talk to us about the feet? And because I know you were like, I came over and you're like, I am not wearing shoes. You're barefoot. You're just feeling the ground. This is a normal part of your life. Do you remember a time when your feet didn't feel good to you, good to the ground? The ground hurt you, or has it been always like your feet have felt great touching the earth and walking?
I'd probably say like right around 30 actually. I've been training for probably 10 years, and this is where me and my business partner had gone to a seminar in New York City. There's a guy like really cool movement guy for anyone in the world. His name's Ido Portal.
Yeah,
Worked with Conor McGregor, but like I've been to multiple seminars of him. But I remember we went to this seminar in New York, right? Me and my business partner, 30, great shape. It's probably 150 people. And culturally, one of the things where they'll sit there and talk for a half hour, and like everyone will sit in a deep squat, like you just. And I remember like 2, 3 minutes into that, where we started to talk, I realized like I couldn't stay like that, and everyone else could.
mm,
And so, two things that I really took away when I started that kind of the movement journey was that like there were these guys that were humongous humans, super good shape, but then they could also move like freaks of nature from just like a flow perspective.
yeah,
And then it's like it brought out this side to me that like, oh, I strength trained like a bro and I looked good with my shirt off, but I really wasn't sustaining health through how I was training. It was like a
yeah,
lie. And then it was like realizing that like movement, like your the ability to just the variability and be able to express movement in every way and have control at these weird places, I realized was the gatekeeper for keeping someone young. Because
yeah,
if your spine can't move like a snake and it's just it's chunked out, the rest of your body isn't going to move well. And I realized that like then that probably like 6 years of my life as a trainer every day for an hour was all kinds of. There was Ito, and then there was like a guy Mike Fitch who did like animal flow,
yeah,
and I really liked it because it was like this athletic version of movement Ito had all kinds of puzzles and riddles with sticks and tennis balls. That was awesome in the sense that like it brought this change to the way I train all of my clients, older people especially, because I can blend it into a workout and it's just one thing. We're lifting weights, but we're doing body weight stuff. And it's the way it's done that it feels like an exercise and it's hard and it will get your heart rate up, but we're also working on your mobility. And this is where like I realized like all these things kind of blended into this one thing, and how that was like a game changer for like how I would move forward as far as coaching fitness and like making that a big part of the way I trained, because I realized there was this gaping hole relative to like what I thought. And that's when I really started to become aware of like how important the feet were. Your
Hmm.
best movers in the world, martial artists, dancers. So for someone to have, he always uses, you have expensive shoes. Obviously, a shoe is going to do the work for your foot. So it's like putting technology on your feet. But now he's like, well, now your feet are dumb. Your feet don't have to think for themselves. And then you realize that they are our tentacles that are out there. They are the roots of our tree. So without a foot that can connect with the ground and let us know where we are in space, we're going to have really bad awareness. And the longer we wear shoes and the less our feet work well, it's like, especially as we get older, the ability to trip and fall with ease and fall with grace is very much dependent on a system that can move well even if you're not looking,
Yeah.
because you can regain balance when necessary. I think that's when I started, probably around 30. I'm 48 now.
Hmm.
And then I realized that like I always had flat feet, but I spent a lot of time. I started having a lot of my older clients take shoes off for part of the session, and then I realized that the minute I went and had Dr. Ramen in Kansas City, the Ramen Center, I realized a lot of times people don't have optimal oral balance of their musculature and their jaw. A lot of times, because people that mouth breathe don't have enough height to their back molars. And essentially, what happens from a pressure perspective in our mouth sets the stage for how we access pressure at our feet, just kind of like that puppet effect. So
Yeah.
if your face is stuck in a pattern, so are your feet. And so about a year into his treatment, I actually got access to both my arches. So then it's just like not being flat footed anymore, but then realizing that, I would always use inserts and shoes. And
Yeah.
then realizing as I got older, I don't really wear shoes a ton. I'll bring them in the gym when I go run or do certain things. But for the most part, I just like to be barefoot. I mean, I'm not wearing shoes right now. And it's kind of one of those things where it's just like, if it was up to me, I would go do more life with shoes off. But I think it's one of those things. It really helps from like an awareness, but it's no
Yeah.
different than our tongue posture, right?
Right.
Our feet are used to being barefoot, and we challenge them all day long, every day. There's a certain level of intelligence and integrity for our structure that is basically being influenced and promoted all day just by how we do our life without shoes on. And I think
Yeah.
that's just as important as far as with like the tongue as well.
It's good. Such a dynamite thing. Oh, I love how you talk about so many things. It's like I just want to like name off a bunch of parts of the body and say, "Greg, go describe it," because you
Go.
bring like really practical and then very like enlightening concepts, and then you explain it in words that sometimes we don't think of associated with those areas. But I couldn't help but think of back when I was growing up, cul-de-sac in our house in Illinois. There's this family that lived down the street, and I just remember we would look and see my brother or my sister and I were the older ones. Maybe my brother was around at this point, born, but we would see these girls, like just the little kids, other kids down the street they would be outside playing without their shoes on. You could tell that statement. right now I'm like, wow, we were like, why do they not have shoes on? Because we grew up feet always on, shoes always on our feet. You know, my dad is an MD cardiologist, so you want to wear shoes in a hospital. It's like you don't want to be
Yeah, yeah,
barefoot, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
growing up in India, they like barely anybody in his village had shoes because we went and visited, and I'm like, whoa, you could count on two hands the amount of people who had shoes. Not for a different reason, but still. So I grew up thinking shoes were normal, barefoot's weird. And I just remember
Ah,
how long it took me to understand what feet were designed for. But yeah, so I sometimes I still have like no, I love being barefoot. I love grounding. But like if I get to the beginning of one of my workshops, I used to teach intuitive movement and dance, and then now I've been teaching my floor to the mouth work and you know that work. But usually I'll involve some aspects of movement, interoception, and I'll usually start with my shoes on, but as soon as I tune into my feet and I see and feel them through awareness, making more contact with the ground and that knowledge of the feet and the ground meet, and my feet start to open up and expand, especially as we're doing stuff with the mouth, my feet kick those shoes off and the socks, and they don't want them on because I'm allowing them to fully express. So I love that moment, but I love to stay in that longer. Um, but it's so pivotal because you like what you said. I see babies all the time where they're born that compromised airway, and the way fascia and embryology converge, it's like our feet form altered from the get go before we even put our feet on the ground because of the way that the fascial web tethers us. With a tongue tie, or the narrow palate, with all these issues. So we could see like, yeah, that right big toe, the right metatarsal, the talus. Some of these things are like at birth, before we're born, already compromised. But then we have an opportunity to, with early help and intervention, as soon as these babies go from crawl, tummy time to like stand, they can form these healthy arches before they have to get help later. So I mean, I know we're speaking to a whole lot of people who are like, "Hey, I never had that." Well, they could do what you did, right? They can go to Dr. Prabhu Raman or others, right, and um, get help to change dramatically things that have been this way from the get go before we're born. So I think that's also a message of hope too. I hear this. Some people are like, "I've been stuck in these inserts or whatever," and I'm
yeah.
like, you know what? If you want to stay in those, great, but do you want to be barefoot and be comfortable? Or let's let's see if we can try to help your alignment from up down, inside out, ground up as well. And people are like astonished when they feel like they don't need these inserts or these orthotics anymore. So I know that that's something you've kind of like journeyed with people on as well. Okay, I'm going to jump to one more thing, and then I want to ask you my a deeper question. But explain the pelvis and the sacrum to me from your understanding. Like, where did you get insight? When did you get insight on that? How does it work in your perspective when we're thinking of this whole being system?
So I look at, I guess, probably like three. I'd probably say three things. So there's two organizations. There's DNS. Um, it's a organization that does like a lot of rehab and stuff. I believe it's out of Prague. Um, the way they kind of broke down how I started to initially understand like the ribs and pelvis was kind of more like a canister, right? Like it was a single unit. So you got the rib cage, the pelvis, and then this is where like there's this expansion compression. This is where your like internal core set with like your abs, and then with pressure. This is kind of where my the thought process started with me. And then I love PRI. Like Ron
Hmm.
is one of the smartest dudes that started. So for everyone, Posture Restoration Institute. So then it started to become like becoming aware that it's like it's not a canister, which is easy for people to understand. It's more like it's two pistons, and oftentimes the issue with the pelvis and the rib cage tends to be one piston. does most of the work. The other piston is seriously deformed due to the way humans kind of develop. And then as a result, we have this biased system due to our breathing and our posture up here, and then what we have access to. And then we have these pistons that get off, one works better. And then this is where like a lot of our asymmetries and our patterns from a dysfunctional perspective kind of go from development perspective all the way till we get older. And then there's a guy, Bill Hartman, who one of the smartest guys I've also met in this world. So I believe he started under the PRI model, like just learning stuff. And then he trained some of the best strength coaches in the world to this day. Very unique thinker. What I love about the way he teaches the body is just everything is thought of from like a fluid mechanics, physics, understanding like a pressure model. And this is where he kind of broke the human structure with the infrasternal angle here on the rib cage into a wide or a narrow. So almost like
Mm.
two archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is where I've learned a lot with all the hypermobility that I almost feel like there's this third component, which is like this narrow, because most of your hypermobile are narrow, but they're almost like a spinny structure. So they don't create very good up and down. Like you take a golfer that's a really hypermobile, they can 130-mile-an-hour club head speed, and you can walk up to them, and if they've got their driver, you could literally push them over.
Yeah.
And it's because it's almost like they're working off of an ice cube. So kind of getting back to what you said. So you asked about like basically the pelvis, so and sacrum. So essentially, I look at like one of the biggest compensations for a lot of times is that for a lot of people, when I don't have tongue on the roof of the mouth, I can't hold the head over the midline. The head stays over the midline. I should have basically a pull through the center of my skull, should go through the center of my arches, just like a
Right.
skewer. Okay.
Yeah.
Tongue can't hold the head. The tongue pushes the palate forward so the head sits back. This is where I get good posture. Tongue can't do its job because it doesn't fit. The kind of lower jaw, everything kind of sinks down. And this is
Right.
where the head loses its support and it's like a bowling ball that wants to roll backwards. So when the head wants to roll back, this is where the rib cage and the pelvis that should sit like this. So you got my head, the ribs and pelvis. The head rolls back. Well, what happens? It's almost like it rips. Imagine I grab your sternum and pull it up like a
Yeah.
tab.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like imagine I grabbed your sacrum in the back and I tip it like a pitcher of water. So when you pull the rib cage up and you tip the pelvis, it's like I've just blown out my internal corset in the
Right.
middle, holding everything together. And now instead of my pelvis being a bowl that's neutral in the rib cage, where I should be like a syringe effect, when I basically lose tongue on the roof of the mouth, my pelvis tips. So then my sacrum ends up being stuck a lot of times because I'm not getting in good pressure. Then I have a pelvis instead of neutral, it's like a spilling milk. So it tends to have the bowl tips forward. This is where I lose this pressure internally. And then this is where I often spend my life. So I have a pelvis that's tipped forward. So my lower body wants to live there. And then I have a head that lives forward as well. And because I never get my tongue back up on my palate to restore forces, this is where my body just gets hijacked structurally.
Mm-hmm.
So now the physics at all my joints changes because I can't sustain pressure in my mouth and my skeleton. So now it's like I have a tongue that doesn't fit, but then my skeleton shifts because my tongue doesn't fit. And when the skeleton shifts, it's not a matter of thinking about it. It's like it's a byproduct of the physics because you can't support the weight over your head. So now I'm working against getting a tongue back on the roof of the mouth, and I'm working against the skeleton being hijacked by the forces, which I call the upside down. Kind of reminds me of Stranger Things. But every day I live in the upside down, it's like I've got to undo the upside down. And the upside down for a body spent mouth breathing for a whole life is like, imagine I take a bike and I throw it in the ocean. Well, if I take it out tomorrow, I can probably pull it up pretty easily. But if it sits in the ocean for 10 years and I pull it up with a crane, it's going to have all kinds of crud. And it's going to take a while to get all the crap off there and actually pull it up. It's going to have seaweed and all kinds of stuff. It's the same thing with our body. So it's like when our body gets basically stuck in the ocean in a down, it's like I'm not expanding anymore. So my body is like kind of almost like one of those blow up Santas in the front yard for Christmas. Well, now it's like the whole body has been kind of sucked to the floor of the ocean. So now I can't expand it with air. This is where like your fascia in your body just kind of gets all matted up, just like the seaweed on the bike. And then it's just like I have to undo this fascial nightmare that is a byproduct of this skeletal dysfunction and hijacking that is all oftentimes caused by a tongue that can't support the head over the midline.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. It's amazing imagery. Boy, you have a gift of that for sure. That's you think in so many visuals, but it's like it is really helpful to think about some of those things that way from the way you describe the, the pistons of the pelvis. And yeah, so and I think something else to throw in there because you said such like so much insightful information is like when you started out with the ribs and the pelvis, talking about the diastasis part of this, ab separation, how much you see that with people who overtrain or improperly train, to the postpartum moms, to the kids who never had their abs come together, and how that can lead to compromise when we're talking midline. Some people with tongue tie, it's like, yeah, that's a problem, but it was a corollary factor and helped the body or derailed the body's attempt to integrate midline. And so their diastasis or ab separation is developmental. It just never came together. And therefore, they can't have that proper synergy and communication. So, boy, I could tell you got into a flow when we started talking about pelvis and sacrum. And it's like, this is where I'm like, I love hearing what you say because some people are like, well, it starts at the head, and then they're like, but it starts at the feet, or it starts at the pelvis, and I'm like, yes, and like we have these epicenters of problem creation where it's like in utero embryologically, we don't look like we look now. Our cells are so cohered and similar in tissue, and um, something I don't talk about enough, but it's like the kidney forms in the pelvis. Like that's where it comes from. And we have three kidneys. And so then we have all this happen embryologically. But I think you're describing a very practical way of somebody who's known the body, who's helped from your own perspective of how what you need, but also how you can think about it on a very practical perspective. Like here's how it here's a perspective of how it works. And with that, you can see keys on how somebody might think about their own body in a way that could help it. Just picturing all that seaweed come up when you pull that bike up out of the ocean and thinking about our bodies the same way. It's like, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I learn from you whenever we talk, right? Because I took off my shoes as soon as we started talking about feet, and I'm like, oh, so it feels so much better. Um, okay, so what I want to dive to because I'm like, oh, there's so many more things I think we could cover. So I think I'd love to talk another time about different pathways of perception of the body and anything from our sense. I'd love to do another talk on proprioception, kinesthetic sense, equilibrioception. Just going at it because I think some of us sensory systems. Some of us think about the body in the mechanical state. Some of us think about it as airway, but it's like it is a very beautifully complex organism that are multiple apparati co-working at the same time. And so you got to like understand each system because if somebody has a problem with equilibrium, you might not just need to work on their balance. Yes, you need to work on their tongue, and but you have to understand both. So without diving into that because there's so much we could talk about, I want to make sure that I ask you these questions I don't know if I gave you enough of a heads up about them, but I want to know, um, this. If you haven't read The Alchemist, it's that powerful book, but it's more than a book, and it's kind of part of the inspiration for Compromise to Alchemized. But it's the story of alchemy, because for me, it's like the body needs alchemy to heal. It doesn't need this therapy and that therapy. It needs the beautiful synergy of community support, validation, resources, tenacity, and some of that's not easy. That's like a concoction that we need to figure out what our own formula is, and we need to learn from others like you who have a lot of keys. So in that, the alchemy of taking somebody from lead to gold, compromised to alchemized. I love what the mystical king in the book tells Santiago, the shepherd, the protagonist of the story, where he tells Santiago that the universe conspires in your favor when you are in pursuit of your personal legend. Personal legend, some people say, I don't understand what that means. I'm like, well, yeah, it's your destiny, your calling. What do you put on this planet to do? Like, what propels you? And when you know what that is, it's what guides you. So, first of all, I'd love to know your personal legend. Second of all, a legend is this place on a map, where on the map you have this place, usually in the bottom right or somewhere, where it has like, here, if you've gone from, there to there, that's an inch, but that's actually equal to, like 10 miles, whatever it is. But also, there's some trees over there, there's a ocean over there, like symbols. That's a way to say, how do you know that you are in your personal legend? Like, what are the things that Greg does in his life, in your life, to keep you on track to where you're constantly pursuing that which you are to do on this planet? So, if you could go, one, what's your personal legend? And two, describe how you navigate your map.
Yeah, I guess first part I would say for myself is just helping other people live healthier lives. I think for me, there's like two
Yep.
funnels for that. Like one is the whole like airway, sleep, breathing perspective, and then the other side for me is like the fitness side because I think there's many people for doing training for 30 years that like they don't want to go there with you or whatever. Um, or maybe they're good here with the airway and stuff. So then there's this whole like I just love fitness, staying active and just helping people. I think it's less about being fit. It's just helping people train smarter so that the later years of their life they don't have to suffer.
Mm.
And I think that's very much an airway thing too, because it's
Yeah.
like I literally one of my good buddies actually I went with him a week ago. He's MLB pitcher and he was going to get fit today, Dr. Rahman for his orthotic and how it's like just realizing that we can have this impact on everyone and you know you have to have access to people and get in front of them in order to help people. So I think having different avenues in which to reach people, and then just kind of having different entry points for who those people are. Like I mostly work with athletes now. Um, However, I just got this new 8.5-year-old little girl that's a little badass gymnast cheerleader, and it's like super fun. I've never trained a kid that little, and how it's like just all the Edo stuff I was telling you. You know, I've got her with like a blue mat, and she's got to balance a golf ball and sit down and get her head to tap and not lose the balance. And I have her challenging her mom, and she's doing some hanging off the bars, and so it's like I think it's enjoying kind of helping people wherever they are because I understand many facets of movement and stuff. And then I think it's more so like I've trained for so long. I've seen so many people in their 60s and 70s that like, and we train like the wealthiest of wealthy people at my gym. Many of them have three houses, way too many cars. But the one thing I see is no matter how much money they have, they can't buy their health back. So when you let it go so bad, it doesn't matter how much money. And then you realize that like these people, they might have three Bentleys, but when you watch the person, and the only thing worse than a Bentley is like when you can't get out of your Bentley and people are watching you because you drive a Bentley. And I think it's this end of the day, if you ask most of these people in their 60s and 70s, they probably give you all their money if you could give them health back. And through my own journey, I laugh how like I was so obsessed with money when I was younger and success in cars, and now I'm like literally like health is everything. Spend as much time as you can with people you love. Stay as healthy as you can, and as long as you can pay your bills, you'll be probably happier than 99% of people.
Mm.
Because I have all these people that have all these things that we're taught to want and chase, and they're not happy, they're not healthy, and it's sad. But like my own journey showed me that like I would have given all those things away to get my life back in a heartbeat. I would have handed it over, and then it made me realize, well, then it's not really worth if it can't give you the most important thing, which is our health. And so like that was the biggest lesson I learned in this
Mm.
journey.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's part one. And then, like, when you ask, how do you know? It's just like you feel it. You you talk to a mom or you get a message from someone that you just helped, and it's like there's no greater feeling. And you just realize, like, I truly want to help the world and I want to change things because there's a lot of people out there that can't afford it or don't know where to turn, which means if the system isn't set up to give that to people inherently for people that don't have money and education, those people are going to suffer for the rest of their lives. And it's like if we don't do a better job of helping people in the beginning that can't afford to or aren't knowledgeable, it just makes me sad to think there's all these people that like they're going to spend the rest of their life drinking, gambling, suicide because they don't have the same chances as everyone else. And a lot of it can be prevented when you protect health and airway and breathing early in life. And it's like, it makes me sad to think that, you know, we can change this and we're going to have to battle the fact that, like, if pediatricians don't have a pediatric expansion doc for a 3, 4 year old kid with breathing issues, and a myofunctional therapist and someone that does tongue tie releases on their speed dial, you should find a new doctor because this is modern day. This is a problem. If someone doesn't understand that, they don't understand breathing. And from a doctor perspective,
Mhm.
that's an issue. This is your child. The most important thing they can do is breathe and sleep to get them to this optimal place in terms of development. And when the person you're putting your child's life's hands in doesn't understand physics and biology 101, that's a problem. And that system needs to change.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Very much. Systems take a lot to topple and change, and thankfully, ones like you are making ripples personally, interpersonally, and with when you share, especially Project Airway and the global, the people across that you reach. So it's powerful. So thanks for sharing on that. And I think it's like a good, um, if I could summarize, there's so much of like how you advocate for others, pursue what's going to help them heal. Like, definitely that healer. And I think you even kind of threw in there like health is a great barometer for like fulfillment of life too. So I almost thought you were already talking about step two of how do you know you're navigating the map, but then you went into further detail of like you're gonna feel it. But it was really cool because you did talk about feeling it. Like you'll feel it when you're in that groove, but you didn't go to just only like what you feel. You said the satisfaction and fulfillment that you feel when you see how much what you share can help others, like the kid. Like I see that as like again, like how much you care. And when you care about people, then your map isn't just how you feel. It's you know you're in your personal legend when you see other people helped so much and like finding health and finding solutions. And um you know, if you are constantly living that legend, it's going to make change. I mean, I think that there's more and more people waking up, individual people, some institutes and clinics, and so I think there's a ripple, but it's going to be like a a big one, a big ripple needed, a big pebble in a massive pond that's needed. So, well, yeah, I know people can find you. We're gonna have everything in the show notes of where people find you, Project Airway on Instagram, and but how can people best when inspired by you? They can comment. Please, people comment, like, follow. Both of us and all that. But how can people most engage with you and pursue more, learning more from you?
Yeah, I think, for me, it's like I've tried to stay away from the Instagram side of fitness. But, my gym, Premier Fitness System, so it's PFS
Hmm.
Fitness. We also, PFS Golf is my personal page for IG, and then Project Airway. And then my business partner, he's Higher Human. He's
Yeah.
awesome for people looking for like meditation, the mindset
Cool.
space. Works with a lot of high level athletes. And then, yeah, I just think whether it's Project Airway, I've got YouTube videos, but I don't do a ton there. It's more like Project Airway. Like my goal in the next year is to start to really bring in stuff where kind of blend the hypermobile space with the Project Airway and taking what I know from fitness into that world, because I realize like how many people it's like I might not work with that demographic all the time in my day job at the
Yeah.
gym, but like I realize there's some really simple things that I've seen that I've done with people that from a daily perspective can just change someone getting out of chronic pain and being able to just do life with way more ease without having to really even leave the house to go to a gym. So I think, for myself, it's like starting to blend that more in. But yeah, like for our gym, we also do training too. So like I've got a great staff, a lot of people well versed in PRI. So, people ever want to do maybe they deal with hypermobility, chronic pain. We train Zoom, FaceTime, we do sessions, we people all over the world. We've got an app that people can download. We can put programs together. So, I mean, we're able to kind of help people wherever, meet them wherever they're at. But just a lot of good free stuff there too for people looking for just options.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being an amazing resource of a person and as a healer, facilitates healing and helps people heal. And just the way you care. And yeah, how amazing it's been to be spend time together in person to see, collaborate with you and see how we can put our minds together. So this conversation has been really good. I really can't wait to have more. We can dive even
Oh yeah,
deeper into
I
some
could talk
topics.
all day with you, buddy.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, everybody. I said it already, but follow Greg, follow Project Airway, and all the ways that he mentioned. You can. I mean, the gym's amazing, and it's a beautiful area there, Scottsdale. We spent a few days in the area, and I love that area. So I won't be a stranger either. And yeah, just comment whether we talked about something that really struck you. Just tell us, hey, that really impacted you, or you want more info, and put it in the comment. But then check in, just reach out to us, and then enjoy this episode. Share it with people who need this message, and just take it out there. Right, spread the wealth. So, all right, Greg. Well, thanks so much for your time.
Appreciate, man.
It was awesome, and I can't wait
Yes, it
to
was.
This is
do this
major.
again.
All right, bud.
Thank you for listening to the Compromise to Alchemized podcast. Really excited to thank Jessica from Lunalux for the music. This track called Major. I want to thank Toshi, who originally did the design work for my cover art. And then I also want to thank Alyssa from my team for podcast publishing, and my whole team, including Kat, for heading up my world. And then also definitely want you all to follow me on YouTube, follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast. Comment, give us a rating, and also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Neil Bulchandani so you can stay tuned to my latest. Thanks so much, and you have an amazing day.
This is major.